So I'm going to click inside, and this is our VPC detail view. And here you see some of the default components. First of all, a route table was generated by AWS for our newly created VPC. So route table, again, is like a virtual router in your private network, right? So in the VPC, in virtual private cloud, basically we get our private network, right? And we have this IP range available inside that network, and we have a route table, right? And the route table basically decides where the traffic will be forwarded to within the VPC. So AWS actually gives us a route table by default whenever we create a VPC, because we didn't specify it here, right? We didn't explicitly create a route table. It was just generated because every VPC needs one. And we also have a network ACL, which is basically a firewall configuration for our VPC, which applies to subnets in that VPC, right? So this is a default one. Let's actually check it out. And just like the security group, which is firewall configuration for servers, so on a server level, this is on a subnet level. And it also has inbound rules and outbound rules. And by default, everything is open. So basically, network ACL doesn't actually restrict any traffic. It is open by default. Security groups are closed by default. And of course, we can configure this as we wish. So let's go back to VPC again, and let's click inside the route table. I'm gonna make it bigger. So inside the route table, this is the one we have. If I actually remove this filter, you see that we have two route tables because one is of the default VPC. It comes with its own route table, and this is one for our newly created VPC, right? And these are the main route tables, or the default ones. So this one is ours. This is our VPC ID. And if I click in routes, here you see one route configured. As I said, route table basically routes the traffic within a VPC. So for example, if we have multiple EC2 instances inside the VPC or some other resources inside, basically route table will be handling and managing the traffic between them. And as you see here, we have one entry and we have a destination. These IP addresses from the range. So this is a range of IP addresses. And if you remember, this is actually the same range we specified for our VPC right here, right? If we go to variables, this is the same exact CIDR block. In our VPC, we have a route table that basically handles all the traffic inside our VPC. And we know it's a traffic inside our VPC because the IP address range matches our VPC's IP address range, and local target basically means that this is handled within the VPC. It doesn't go outside to the internet, it stays within our virtual private cloud and our private network, right? So that is the entry that we have by default, and that means that our VPC isn't connected to internet. All the traffic right now is handled within the VPC, but nothing goes outside or comes inside. And if I actually click inside the route table of the default VPC of the region, here I have two entries. The one is similar to this one, which is basically the IP address range of the VPC, right? This is the default VPC IP range. It has local target, so basically traffic within, and we have the second entry, which basically covers all the IP addresses of the world, each and every one of them. And as a target, we have Internet Gateway. So this means that this route table actually handles or will handle all the traffic coming from the internet and leaving the internet, right? So this Internet Gateway is configured for the VPC for internet connectivity. And you can see some other details about the Internet Gateway. However, this is all we need to know at the moment. So basically, that means that we need the same entry right here so that we can connect our VPC to the internet. And we're gonna create that also with Terraform. So let's go back to our main TF, and in the next line, we're actually gonna create a new route table. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new route table. We're not gonna use the default one, we're gonna create a new route table, and we're gonna create those two rules. So basically the one for internal traffic and one for connected to internet. So let's go back to our main Terraform file and let's define a resource called AWS route table. And let's actually call it my app route table for consistency. And inside here, we're gonna configure some attributes. So first of all, we need to decide which VPC this route table will belong to. We're creating this route table in our VPC, obviously. So we're gonna reference it like this. As a second attribute, we are gonna have to define the routes. So each route will be its own block. These are basically the entries right here. Now, by default, the entry for the VPC internal routing is configured automatically, right? So that means that this first entry for the new route table that we're creating, not this one, not the default one, this entry will be automatically created. So we don't have to specifically define it, or we can't actually define it at all. So we're gonna leave that out. So instead, we're gonna have to create the second entry, which basically handles the internet gateway. And this is gonna be the route block for that. And in route block, we have two attributes. We have CIDR block, and this is going to be basically any IP address which is represented by all zeros. And the second attribute is gateway ID. And this is gonna be the internet gateway ID for our route table. Now, for our VPC, actually we don't have an internet gateway, so we're gonna need to create that resource. And it's actually pretty easy. Resource AWS Internet Gateway, and again let's call it my app Internet Gateway. And here we have just one attribute that we need to define, which is VPC ID, right? So we are creating Internet Gateway in the VPC, and then we are using that internet gateway inside our route table to tell the route table, hey, please handle the requests of the VPC to go to and also come in from the internet. So we're gonna reference this internet gateway here in our route table. Like this, and ID, because we're gonna need the ID, right? And finally, we're gonna add some text here. We want to tag each component so that we know it is created by us, and also that it belongs to the same environment. Let's use the same prefix, and let's call it route table, like this, and let's use the same tag for the internet gateway. And by the way, even though this resource needs to be created first so that route table can reference it, it doesn't have to be defined before the resource. So basically in Terraform, this is a good thing that Terraform is smart enough to figure out in which order or in which sequence it needs to create the resources. So for example, if you have one resource referenced in another one, Terraform can figure out that the first resource needs to be created first. So even if we define it in the, let's say, wrong order, Terraform will figure out which resource to create first and so on. So we don't have to define it in any particular order, which is a good thing about Terraform. It can figure out these kind of dependencies. So let's leave it like this. So if we look again at our configuration, we have the VPC subnet inside. We're connecting VPC to Internet Gateway, and then we are configuring a new route table that we're creating in the VPC to route all the traffic to and from internet using this Internet Gateway. So think about the route table as a virtual router inside your VPC, and you can think about Internet Gateway as a virtual modem that connects you to the internet. And with this configuration, let's actually do Terraform plan, and let's see what will happen when we apply this. And there you go. The VPC and subnet are already created. So this time the Internet Gateway and route table will be created. So let's actually apply. And let's check. I'm going to refresh this, and there you go. We have a route table that we just created. And as you see right here, it says not main route table. So basically this is like a default route table for our VPC, and this is the secondary or not default. So we have created a new route table, and if we scroll to the routes, we have the same entry as before. So this is our VPC IP address range. And as I said, we didn't specify this in our configuration. This was created by default without having to specify it. So we have that right here. And this is the one that we configured. We have a routing to and from all the IP addresses using Internet Gateway. And this is the Internet Gateway that we created. This one right here. It has the tag and it belongs to our VPC. So now our VPC is configured to allow internet traffic.